Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management. Last time we talked about organizational life cycle principles or perspective, how organizations go through a life cycle situation, how we conceive organizations through a life cycle situation. Now, that is very interesting because once we try and understand the organizational life cycle journey, then a natural question comes to us is in terms of the choices of strategic steps. I would not call those strategies continuously so as to create a differentiation between strategy which has a long term perspective and its association is evident with the vision which the organization has, the larger vision, the business vision, the mission and so on. And here now when we talked about strategic management process, you would remember that we referred to objectives, crafting strategies and execution and then monitoring. So, these 4 steps or this sphere is associated with choice of strategic steps or strategic choices. So, as of now try and conceive that we are talking of strategic steps in terms of strategic choices, and books and the text which we are continuously referring to, all those texts primarily are divided into 2 spheres which you would realize in due course of time. One is competition based sphere and one is beyond competition based sphere. So, one you may talk about in terms of red ocean which Michael Porter has talked about, and the other you may talk about in terms of blue ocean which W. Chan Kim has talked about. Great thinkers, great strategy professors, they have given 2 larger perspectives for us to dwell upon. But as of now, when we are talking of strategic choices, primarily we would be going for a competition based view, and I will be coming back to beyond competition based view or bypassing the competition which W. Chan Kim has talked about. So, that we will separately discuss, but as of now just focus upon that once we are looking into the same industry sphere with a specific value chain perspective, 2 elements, same industry sphere with a perspective of value chain perspective of the organization itself, the products and services which the organization is dealing with, that is direct competition. And I would try to differentiate the competition sphere now itself, but to dwell upon later on. But carrying forward from the discussion which we had on the life cycle sphere and collating that discussion with the strategic choices, let us see how the story builds up. So, as I said, the text refers to strategic steps with cost and differentiation perspective, which we would be understanding in a short while from now. We will try to decipher that. But before that, I wish to build an understanding in your minds for your convenience, that once we are thinking in terms of life cycle sphere of an organization, life cycle space of an organization, how it dwells into a natural choice of generic strategies in terms of growth, stability and turnaround. That we will discuss first, and then we will decipher those strategies or strategic steps into cost and differentiation sphere. That is how we would go ahead as far as this segment goes, and we will be talking about the drivers of cost as well as value drivers also, and how organizations are using those, that we will see through the examples. So, but before we go ahead, let us again build up a perspective around what strategy is all about. So, we have been trying to look at strategy with the perspective of several kinds of thinkers. Here again a sort of a definition or a quote you may say is there for you, which says that strategy is all about combining choices, and this quote, this definition focuses upon the strategic choices. So, strategy is all about combining choices of what to do and what not to do. What kind of steps are most relevant for us at this particular point of moment. If you want to collaborate this thinking with micro level or functional level choices, you can do that with 2 spheres, these 2 questions, what to do and what not to do. One sphere is associated with strategic steps which we would be dwelling upon in due course of time, and all through we would be referring to those examples. One sphere can be innovation based, which I would not digress into too much, but then we have to refer to that, because differentiation is associated with innovation. If you want to go into the details of how we choose the points of innovation as far as generating a differentiation as compared to our competitors, please refer to my course on innovation in marketing and marketing of innovation, which we launched in January this year. So, that elaborates upon how we think in terms of innovation as a central point of propelling market development, and largely you would see it is all about strategy. So, what to do and what not to do into a system, we create a system around these two questions, into a system that creates the requisite fit between what the environment needs, the present business environment, the techno-political, sociological environment, and several other factors are there, between what the environment needs, what the customers need, and what the company does. How you actually create a synergy between these two. Many a times you actually influence the environment, many a times you get influenced by the environment, but the objective is that you develop a synergy between the environment and your organization, wherein customer is definitely the part of the environment you work in. So, this was given by Costas Markides, a professor and a consultant. Now, let us look into the life cycle perspective of how we should be looking at strategies, and I would be going towards some micro steps, as I said, cost and differentiation based micro steps. So, but let us look at a larger sphere of strategic steps. For example, you are thinking in terms of choosing a strategic step for according to the environmental forces which are directing you, and you are thinking in terms of a few years, and what kind of steps you should be cumulatively choosing for few years, and then we will be going for micro steps. So, let us try to utilize a two-dimensional plane, and let us take a cue from the organizational life cycle perspective which we developed. Let us try to decipher that according to a life cycle sphere. So, organization initiates its operations and probably sometimes dip down and goes up, and then goes steady and then goes down and then goes up and then goes down and then goes up. Probably you may go to the history of organizations in due course of time, you may go into the history of organizations which have been there for 100 odd years, and I have been using the examples of Tatas and SBI and these kind of organizations which have been largely living for longer time. You can choose the example of LIC and Amul and several other kinds of banking, non-banking, financial organizations and product organizations, and levers and several kinds of organizations which have spent considerable time serving this world. And the sphere is the same, that they have a vision, they have a business vision and a mission. I am not talking of organizations which are not actually focused upon the development of society at large as of now, because we have to create a differentiation to develop our understanding in due course of time, and that is the stand we are trying to take. Now, the two fundamental points which we are dwelling upon is strategically managing things. So, now here comes that thing, strategically managing the life cycle of the organization through management of strategy. Both the things are coming to us simultaneously as of now. Let us see what happens. So, for example, an organization is growing. Now, the parameters of the growth can be several, but the parameters of the growth largely, as I talked about earlier also, are some numbers wherein let us say revenue with customer retention can be a parameter. Addition of new customers can be another parameter coupled with that. Employee retention, number of employees, growth of number of employees and retention of employees can be a parameter wherein growth is justified. We all understand what growth means. If you want to generate a synonymity, you can generate the synonymity with human life cycle, wherein growth of humans basically depends upon how well they grow, and it is a simple synonymity which we can develop. Otherwise, just for an example, it is not necessary that it should match exactly what we are talking about, but still growth means addition to what we are trying to do, and taking advantages of that and making whole of the value chain get benefits out of that. That is why it is called value chain. So, once we are going for growth, for example, and we are adding on numbers here, let us say growth and slightly dipping down in terms of growth. So, we may say it is small g, but it is dipping down. Then again growth, then somehow you are stagnating. So, I will come back to this phase slightly later on. Let us look into this growth phase, and we are going this can be this way also. So, once we focus upon this growth phase of an organization, and an industry comparison definitely can be a parameter, market share can be a parameter, and so on. How industry is growing and how how relative to that growth you are growing in terms of being an organization. So, once we are focusing upon this growth phase, you see it is quite evident that growth would happen anyways. You have initiated a business, however shorter span of time of growth would be there, but it would happen. When something takes birth, it has to grow. How well it grows is a matter of concern here. So, it grows by itself, but if it is growing by itself and it is not being strategically propelled, strategically managing things through management of strategy, then it is out of our control if it dips down. If sudden environmental forces, they compel such an organization to dip down. For example, there were several mobile companies which grew at a very fast pace in due course of time. We discussed that earlier also. In technology space, the span of the organization life on an average is lesser as compared to manufacturing organization, but then you take that frame of as far as that span goes. For example, if it is a technology organization, average age is 40 years, you may take that, yes, this life cycle goes for 40 years. That is not the point of concern here. Whatever is the lifespan, the organizations grew faster in terms of mobile communication goes, and I am talking of hardware producers, that is mobile handset producers like Nokia, BlackBerry, who are offering support to the service providers through handsets, through equipment. So, they grew, they went ahead and they dipped down. I would not talk about that it was some laxity on their part or complacency on their part, but there would have been specific reasons wherein environmental forces, competitive forces, which are definitely part of the external environment, compelled them to not to do so well. I would not say they did not do good, not to do so well, because you see it's very easy for us to be critical about what people did not do or organizations could not do, but before being that critical, we must understand that it is a very difficult call for an organization to be managed and to be steered for a very, very long time, because environmental forces are extremely volatile, that we can appreciate at least. So, once we are thinking in terms of this growth, now let me draw another sphere just focusing upon growth. So, once we are focusing upon this growth somehow, if it goes by itself, it may choose to dip down because of the environmental forces, lack of resources, or industry pressures, or industry when it is not doing so well, it will affect the growth of the organization also. But if you deliberately choose specific steps, which we will be talking about in terms of cost and differentiation and those kind of things, as compared to your competition, wherein first you have to rightly conceive the competition, who is your actual competitor. So, rightly conceiving the competition or acknowledging the competition. So, if you are rightly doing that, this is rightly conceiving the competition. So, if you rightly conceive the competition and the capabilities of the competition, and you focus upon your core competencies, which we will be referring to continuously in due course of time as well. So, core competencies and strengths, and you analyze those, and then you choose strategic steps in terms of several kinds of steps which we will be talking about in a short while from now, then this growth becomes strategic growth, and we can call that this is growth strategy. So, growth which is inevitable will happen by itself is called growth strategy if it is driven well. what would happen? It is very clear to us that the length of the growth, the time span of the growth would be longer, and that is for sure. Several organizations, even in mobile space, they are doing exceptionally well, and before I may tell you, you would name Apple, Samsung and several other organizations which are doing exceptionally well in terms of growth parameters, because they decided those well, they focused upon those elements and they chose very specific micro level steps to steer this growth. So, first strategy which comes to us with reference to the life cycle span of an organization is called growth strategy. Now, second element, here you have rightly conceived the competition and you are actually focusing upon the competition with the perspective of differentiation. I would go for that. Now, let us look into the second sphere. So, here I am shortening as far as growth perspective goes. After a particular kind of a stage, you are not growing in the numbers and with according to the benchmarks and the parameters which you have been following, those are industry parameters or benchmarks or your own potential based parameters. So, here comes in potential, that is, this is what we can do in terms of utilizing our resources and our abilities and our core competencies goes. This is our potential, this is the kind of human resource and technological capability we have. So, if despite of all the potential you have in terms of being an organization, you are stagnating somewhere in terms of the numbers, what you do naturally is, or naturally what comes to you first of all is that it somewhere comes to a level where it is not showing the growth addition, but it is maintaining itself somehow. A healthy body maintains itself for a while and you feel that okay, I am not growing that way, I have grown whatever I had to, but then I am maintaining that growth now, I am there. So, this phase wherein this phase, you may call it saturation if it comes by itself, and you may call it stability strategy if you choose to go for steps which would stabilize the situation as compared to the industry and the other benchmarks which you would have chosen, definitely depending upon the potential you have in terms of different kinds of things which we have just enumerated, your human resources, your technological resources, your compatibility with the environment and strategic fit with the environment and so on. Somehow Kodak kind of organizations did that for a long time. If you will try to visit the photography industry, camera industry long back, several organizations they saturated because several kinds of technological pressures were coming in terms of different kinds of substitutes which were coming for the people to use, and we will be talking about substitution and alternative just right after this. So, you would realize that many organizations they maintained themselves that saturation level through strategic thinking and strategic choices, and that is where you call that as stability strategy. So, growth strategy, if it is deliberate and you have chosen to do few things which are steering your growth. Stability strategy, if somehow you have chosen to stabilize the situation for a long time. Many organizations they keep on living with this for a very long time, decades also, and they are doing well. You would realize that many organizations they are doing good and they are there forever, and you realize that although many organizations they have bypassed them in terms of market share or growth parameters, and these organizations which were number one at one part of time, they are not number one or industry leaders, but they are there, they are doing good, and that is how. You may go to Statista and look for comparative data of organizational revenues or organizational growth through different kinds of parameters for last 2 decades, and you would realize what I am talking about. There are several companies in terms of, for example, mobile telecommunication goes, Motorola was doing exceptionally well in terms of their growth goes, then they went for stability and they tried to maintain that. In the meanwhile, Samsung came in and they bypassed them, Sharp also came in, Samsung also came in, Apple also came in, Apple became industry leader and so on. So, but several organizations which were industry leaders earlier, they stabilized themselves. Now, let us go to another scenario. So, you have steered growth. So, you have steered growth, you have gone for stability, and despite of all your efforts, somehow, because you could not infuse fresh investments, you could not bring in extra freshness in terms of human resource, you could not go for technological changes and so on, somehow after a particular kind of a stage this dips down. And if it dips down, then it is decline, which is inevitable, it comes naturally. So, decline is the key word, wherein organization is declining. The parameters which we are using for analyzing growth and stability, same parameters are not doing well. Those indicators are dipping down, number of customers is going down, stockholders, they are reducing in number, employees, they are leaving, organizations are not doing well somehow. Mahindras, they passed with through this phase when they were not working well as far as their products and organizational growth goes and so on, and so many things. There are several kinds of examples and so on. Now, once you are going for decline, you are required to rethink everything starting from your business vision to monitoring level, the strategic management process, and you have to revisit the strategic choices you are making in terms of cost and differentiation and innovation, whichever way you look at it. There are several kinds of strategic choices which you have to make at that particular point of time, and differentiation definitely requires innovation and so on. So, once you are declining, you take a choice here and then you try to turn it around. You want to bring the things back. This is wherein we go for revitalization stage. And this revitalization stage, when is steered well, it is called turnaround strategy. You may name it with, you may see this strategy or strategic choice at large with different names and different kinds of texts given by intelligent authors, but just for our understanding you may call it turnaround as of now. So, we are turning the organization around back towards first stabilizing and then going for another trajectory of growth. Should I remind you of the examples like Enfield? Should I remind you of the examples like Mahindra Automotives? Should I remind you of several kinds of examples wherein organizations were dipping down in terms of the complete sphere, not only their products, but they were dipping down. They were sort of vanishing actually. People started considering at one part of time that Enfield is no more there. They have stopped producing, and they practically did almost stop producing at one part of time. Retailers were getting away, people were changing their businesses as far as their value chain partners go. Their suppliers they started supplying to others. Basically, if they remained in that business, some suppliers changed their businesses also, some suppliers and retailers, they started going for negotiating with different kinds of organizations to become their retailers and so on. So somehow it was vanishing, but then Enfield decided to revitalize itself. The organization thought that this sphere should be revitalized and they turned around everything. So, that is where turnaround strategy comes in. So, now just to look into as far as how this competitive perspective should be seen, one last thing which I want to add in this segment, and just to then I will make you revisit whatever we have discussed, is that when we are thinking in terms of competitive sphere, I would be talking about bypassing the competition later on, which there also we would use these two elements or terms which are in front of you, substitution and alternatives. So, when we are trying to steer growth or steer the organization through stability strategy or through turnaround, we have to focus upon the competition with the perspective of us being a substitution or someone being our substitution, or us being an alternative and someone being our alternative somehow. So, just to create a differentiation for you, the dictionary meaning as per Cambridge for both of these terms would definitely help you, and I would request you to dwell upon these two very important terms wherein economics literature has explained these terms at length. So, substitution is to use something or someone instead of another thing or person, that is you are a substitution to this product basically. So, organizations when they think in terms of direct competition, they are talking of substitution largely. Alternative, something that is different from something else, especially from what is usual and offering the possibility of a choice. For example, quenching the thirst. You may choose soft drink, you may choose a milk based product, you may choose coconut, you may choose sugarcane juice, or you may choose several other kinds of things. So, these may be slightly alternative to each other. The focus is on quenching the thirst or beating the heat or whatsoever. So, you may think in terms of nutritional value as well as quenching the thirst, you may go for coconut juice or something else, and or you may just go for plain soft drink if you just want the taste and the flavor and it is usual for us and so on. So, you see, if a soft drink manufacturer has to think in terms of competition with the perspective of alternatives, they have to think about all the products in the sphere, and we may dare to go beyond that as well. But then if they are focusing just on the very specific industry which they are actually belonging to or they consider belonging to, for example, soft beverage industry, soft drink industry itself. So, there you have substitutions in terms of Coke and Pepsi or similar kinds of products. So, these two elements would guide us in as far as this sphere of strategic choices throughout the life cycle of the organization goes. So, for example, growth, if you are focusing upon direct competition in terms of substitution, then you would have different kinds of steps you would be choosing at the micro level with that kind of a perspective in mind. And if you are going for alternative kind of a perspective, alternatives related perspective, then growth strategy may include differentiation with a difference. That is what I want to say, and I would be coming to that segment very soon. So, that will actually support our argument here. If you are going for stability strategy with the perspective of substitution, then your steps might be focused upon the direct competition, and on the other side if you are keeping alternatives in your mind, then your stability strategy would include several other kinds of things which may include repositioning of the product as well. Many a times organizations they try to reposition their products. And lastly, if you are thinking in terms of turnaround, then you may think of several kinds of things, and many a times it is seen that somehow turnaround definitely looks into alternatives as well. That is the point of concern basically. For example, if you are turning around an automotive company and you are focused upon multi-utility vehicles or sports utility vehicles or cars for that matter, and then you think that we are not manufacturing a car and we are trying to manufacture an SUV, and how to think in terms of combining both, that is again a direct kind of a competition substitution itself. But then if you start thinking in terms of somehow that my users might be using long distance commuting, for long distance commuting my users would be using, let us say, aeroplanes also, and trains also, or luxury buses also, or cabs also, then you may start thinking in terms of how to give a product which gives them driving pleasure for long distances, how they can carry more things, how you can develop off-roading experience on as far as within a car goes. That kind of a thinking process comes to you when you are thinking in terms of turnaround. I will be coming back to you with interesting discussions on how then to proceed after this frame of thought, how then to proceed with micro level strategic choices, which we will be calling, they are also called as generic strategies by authors, but here this is more generic to those strategic choices. That is what I wish to submit in front of you before I go ahead with those micro level strategic choices in my next session. Till then, goodbye.